I, 27M, and my husband, 37M, have been married for 3 years, dating for 6. He has an ex-wife, 37F, which he divorced a year before we met. We have a son, 7M, who was adopted after we got married and who I love as my own child, because he is. I know my husband, Peter, fake name, is bisexual. I have no problem with it, and I had no problem with his ex-wife, Allison, also fake name. I did have a problem with his family as they're a bit homophobic and are always telling Peter he should get back together with Allison. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were at his family's town because it was my son, Jack's, fake name, birthday, and we wanted to spend it as family. My mother-in-law decided it would be a good idea to invite Allison, so she arrived in the middle of the party. I didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent all my time with Jack, playing with him and his cousins at his request. When it was time to cut the cake, I noticed Allison and Peter weren't there, so I went inside and looked for them around the house. I found them in Peter's old bedroom taking their clothes off. I stood there in shock for a moment, but then I left and went back to celebrating Jack's birthday. Part of me wanted to scream and cry, but I also was in shock and I refused to make Jack's birthday about me. We cut the cake and opened the presents. People were already leaving when Allison and Peter came back. Peter took me aside and started saying that I shouldn't have cut the cake without him present, and it was disrespectful. I stared at him and just said, "I'm sorry. I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He got quiet, so I took Jack and left the house to go back to the hotel. Once I put Jack in bed and made sure he was asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom and broke down. I called a friend and he tried his best to console me. I only calmed down in the morning when I took Jack for breakfast because I didn't want him to see me like that. I'm now watching him play in the park and I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to have a broken family. I don't want him to know that relationships aren't a happy ever after. Peter has been calling and texting, apologizing for everything, and I'm tempted to forgive him. I'm tempted to just have my family back, and all my friends are saying that it was just a mistake, that he was vulnerable and Allison is his ex-wife. So what am I supposed to do now? I need the advice from people who don't know my husband or me personally. Please, any advice is helpful. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Teach your son that his future partners has to respect him in their relationship by not being a cheating bastard. OP. I do want to teach him this stuff, but he's too young, and I'm just scared that he'll get a bad view of relationships if he sees his parents divorce. OP on collecting evidence on his husband's cheating, and if the husband has done this before. OP. From what I've been able to gather from the messages and calls, it has happened twice, including the time that I caught them. I hadn't thought about STIs, so thank you. I'll get tested. OP responds to multiple comments about his husband not respecting him, and the cheating wasn't the first time. OP. It's not. I found out it's the second time, but I don't want my son to know what happened. He's unaware and happy thinking his dads will be together forever. I don't want to break that illusion. Why didn't OP interrupt his husband's cheating with the ex? OP. I was really too shocked and hurt by what I saw that I just stood there without them noticing me. I then heard my son and unconsciously focused on him and only him. A copying mechanism maybe? I don't know. I was mostly in autopilot. Commenter. NTA, but you should leave. I know it won't be easy, but if you stay, think of it as showing Jack that it's okay for your husband or wife to treat you badly. If you want him to know about happily ever after, you need to show him that it's okay to not settle and you work hard for your goals no matter what they are, and work towards them with kindness, honesty, and integrity. Kids are far more impressionable than we give credit for, and as someone who has known so many families where the person being hurt hasn't walked away, that hurt spreads until it damages everyone. Relating to just yourself here, there is a huge safety factor. Regardless of the sex of each individual involved, staying with a cheater also puts you in danger because you don't know everyone they're sleeping with and, more importantly, what STIs they can be carrying. So think about your son and your health and leave. Emotionally, if you're surrounded by people telling you to forgive and forget, those people are not safe to be around as you have no clue if they've been hiding this from you for a while either. Update 1. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for your advice and I want to explain some things before the actual update. But thank you for opening my eyes about my situation. Peter and Allison didn't notice me when I saw them. There was music very loud downstairs, and they weren't facing the door. I didn't stop them because I was in shock. I just stood there for a moment and I heard my son, so I unconsciously focused on him. I was pretty much in autopilot. Peter didn't come to the hotel with me because I changed to a different one. He did try to follow me, but I took a taxi and left. As far as I know, he's staying with his parents and Allison left. We met when I was 20 and he was 30. We started as friends, and we ended up dating. Yes, we're both men and no, I didn't feel manipulated or groomed by him. Those were the most asked things, and I did answer some comments. Not all. Now on to the update. I did as some of you said and took some tests to discard any STIs or STDs. The results are coming back in a few days, and I will take another one in 3 weeks to be sure. My son is having a sleepover with a friend, and I decided to speak with my husband. He came by our house after a few minutes. I texted him. He asked about Jack and I told him where he was. Then we sat on the couch and started talking. I started crying after a few minutes, and he followed after. I asked some simple questions: when, why, how many times, among others, and this is what I could figure out by all the things he said. It happened for the first time when he visited his parents alone 2 years ago. They invited her. They both got drunk. He was feeling lonely as I had been more attention to Jack since we adopted him, and they slept together. Nothing happened again until our son's birthday party. He said his mother pressured him a bit, and he caved in. I don't believe he did it for that reason, but I don't know. He said he doesn't love her, and I believe him, but it doesn't negate the fact of what he did. After talking for a while, I told him that I wanted a divorce. He started sobbing and begging for another chance, but I told him that I can't give him another chance because I wouldn't be able to trust him again, and I don't want that in a relationship. He kept crying and begging for another 30 minutes until I told him that we have to think about Jack and his well-being, that we could stay friends DS and co-parent him. He got mad, really mad. He started yelling that it was all Jack's fault, that we shouldn't have adopted him, that he's the one who's getting between us. I was crying and really scared. I had never seen him this angry. He hit the table and stormed out of the house. I called the house where Jack is staying at and told them if Peter shows up there, they can't open the door. After the little episode, I was scared that Peter would try to hurt Jack. I called my friend again, Thomas, and told him everything that happened. He came by and is staying with me until I'm better. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what to do and how to go on with the divorce. Comments. Commenter. You are absolutely not wrong for not forgiving your husband. His reaction to the news of divorce, blaming your adopted son, is alarming and shows his true colors. Stay strong and prioritize your and Jack's safety. Commenter 2. Sorry you are going through this. On the bright side, it seems that you will have no problem getting a full custody. It is better to have one loving parent than 2 co-parents, where one is resenting you for mere existence. Commenter 3. I can't believe that he is taking no accountability for his actions and blaming your completely innocent son. Every time you start missing your soon-to-be ex, I want you to please remember what he said about your son. It will be painful, but it will strengthen your heart and mind to move on from that toxic man. You are definitely not the AH. Keep striving for a healthy, happy new relationship for you and your son. Update 2. So, a lot has happened since the last update. I wasn't planning on coming back here so soon, but things got way more complicated than I expected. First off, thank you again for all the support. Reading your comments has been a strange source of comfort during this absolute mess. Now, let me catch you up. After Peter stormed out of the house and said those horrible things about Jack, I decided I needed space to really process everything. Thomas, my friend who's been staying with me, has been a rock through all of this, even though I know he's dealing with his own stuff. He stayed at my place that night, and we both agreed it would be best if I kept my distance from Peter for a few days while I figured out my next steps. Cue the chaos. The next morning, I got a call from Peter's mom. Let's call her Linda. She's hysterical on the phone, accusing me of ruining Peter's life and saying things like, "How could you break up this family over a little mistake?" She kept repeating that Jack was never supposed to happen, and how Allison was the true love of Peter's life. Yeah, so much for subtlety. I didn't engage, just hung up on her. But the whole thing left me shaking. It's like Peter's family is coming out of the woodwork to defend him, and I'm the villain in this twisted fairy tale. I've been getting passive-aggressive messages from his cousins, too, saying I need to do what's best for Jack, which, apparently, means letting Peter have his way and just pretending like nothing happened. And, oh, guess who decided to make an appearance next? Allison. Yup, she showed up at my house 2 days after the meltdown. I don't even know how she knew where I lived, but there she was, standing on my porch, holding a freaking casserole dish like we're on some sitcom. Allison tries to apologize, saying she didn't mean to come between us, and it was all just a mistake. She also pulled the whole "I was drunk" card, which, newsflash, doesn't make it better. I don't know if it was the audacity of her showing up or just the stress of the situation, but I completely lost it. I told her to get off my property before I called the police, and, thankfully, she left, but not before giving me that pitiful, doe-eyed look, as if she's the victim in all this. After that, I decided I couldn't stay in that house anymore. It just didn't feel like home, especially after Peter's outburst. I took Jack and moved in with Thomas for the time being. It's not ideal, but Jack's happy enough playing with Thomas's dog, and I'm grateful to have someone who has my back. And then things went even further off the rails. I filed for divorce 2 days ago. Peter lost his mind when he found out. He showed up at Thomas's apartment at 2 a.m., banging on the door like a lunatic. Jack was asleep, thank God, but Peter was yelling outside, demanding to see him, saying things like, "You can't take my son away from me," and "This is all your fault." Thomas ended up calling the police because Peter just wouldn't leave. By the time they got there, Peter was in full meltdown mode, crying, screaming about how he was forced into this marriage and how I never understood him. The police calmed him down and got him to leave, but the whole thing left me feeling even more unsettled. I don't know if Peter's spiraling, or if this is who he's been all along and I just never saw it. I'm filing for full custody of Jack. After seeing Peter's behavior, I don't think he's in any state to co-parent. I've spoken to a lawyer, and we're preparing for a custody battle. I'm dreading it, but I'll do whatever it takes to protect Jack. As for Peter, he's been sending me these long, rambling text messages, apologies, threats, and random memories of our time together, like some bizarre emotional roller coaster. One minute he's begging me to reconsider the divorce, saying we can go to therapy, that we can fix this for Jack's sake. The next minute, he's blaming me for everything that's gone wrong in his life, including his relationship with Allison. Honestly, it's exhausting. Meanwhile, Allison has apparently gone radio silent, no calls, no texts, nothing. I'm guessing she's finally realized she's not getting some fairy tale reunion with Peter after all. The one thing I'm most concerned about now is Jack. He's starting to ask more questions about why we're not staying at home, about why Peter hasn't been around as much. I'm trying to keep things as normal as possible for him, but I know I can't protect him from everything forever. I'm just hoping that when the time comes, I'll know how to explain all this to him in a way that doesn't completely shatter his little world. Update 3. After the last update, things were quiet for about a week. Peter wasn't texting as much, and his family had finally backed off. I thought maybe he'd finally accepted that we were done and was just focusing on his own life. But nope, the universe wasn't going to let me off that easy. I was at Thomas's place, watching TV with Jack, trying to pretend everything was normal. Jack had been asking more questions lately, mostly about Peter. He wanted to know why his dad hadn't been around and when we'd be going back home. It was breaking my heart, but I just kept telling him that Peter was busy and that we were staying with Uncle Thomas for a little while longer. I knew I couldn't keep dodging the truth forever, but I wanted to hold off for as long as possible. Then, the bomb dropped. Peter's lawyer served me with custody papers. Joint custody. I nearly dropped the envelope when I saw it. After everything that had happened, his outbursts, the cheating, the threats, he actually had the audacity to fight for joint custody. My lawyer had warned me this could happen, but I didn't think Peter would actually go through with it, especially after his meltdown at Thomas's place. But no, apparently, Peter is hellbent on playing the doting father now that the divorce is on the table. I was furious. How could he, after all the things he said about Jack, after blaming our son for his screw-ups, he now wants to play house again? It was like living in some alternate reality where nothing made sense anymore. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case for full custody, especially with Peter's erratic behavior, but I still felt sick to my stomach. The idea of having to fight him in court, of dragging Jack through that mess, it was more than I could handle. But I knew I didn't have a choice. If Peter was going to fight dirty, then so would I. I told Thomas about the custody papers, and he was just as shocked as I was. He suggested we go out for a drink, just to clear my head. I'm not much of a drinker, but at this point, I figured why not. Jack was having another sleepover with his friend, so I didn't have to worry about him for the night. Enter the next plot twist. We're at this bar, trying to decompress, when who do I see walk in? Peter and Allison, together, laughing, talking like they don't have a care in the world. It was like someone had slapped me across the face. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, drowning in stress, dealing with lawyers and custody battles, and they're just out having a night on the town like nothing ever happened. Thomas noticed them too, and before I could even react, he was out of his seat and walking toward them. I grabbed his arm and tried to stop him, but it was too late. He was already in full protective best friend mode, and nothing I said was going to stop him. He stormed up to Peter and Allison, causing a scene right in the middle of the bar. Peter looked like he'd seen a ghost when he saw me standing there. Thomas started laying into them, calling Peter a coward and Allison a homewrecker. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die, but part of me was also relieved that someone was finally saying what I'd been thinking all along. Peter, of course, tried to play the victim. He kept saying it's not what it looks like, and that they were just talking about Jack. Right, because divorced parents always meet up at bars for cozy little chats about their kids' school schedule. Allison, meanwhile, just stood there, silent, like she didn't know what to say. Typical. The bartender ended up kicking us out after things got too heated. Thomas was ready to throw hands, but I managed to pull him away before it escalated even more. I was shaking with anger, but I knew we couldn't keep causing scenes in public. This wasn't the time or place for that kind of showdown, no matter how satisfying it would have been. After we left, Peter tried texting me, saying he wanted to explain everything and that we needed to talk. But I wasn't about to fall for that trap. I ignored him and spent the rest of the night venting to Thomas about how ridiculous this whole situation had become. But it doesn't end there. The next day, I got a call from Jack's school. Apparently, Peter had shown up unannounced and tried to pick Jack up without telling me. The school, thank God, didn't release Jack to him since I'm listed as the primary contact, but they said Peter had been insistent and caused a bit of a scene. I was livid. Not only had Peter tried to pull some stunt with the custody papers, but now he was actually going behind my back to try and take Jack from school. I immediately called my lawyer and told her everything. She's working on filing an emergency motion to restrict Peter's access to Jack until we can get the custody situation sorted out in court. I won't let him play these games anymore, especially not with our son. Jack, thankfully, doesn't know what's going on. He just thinks his dad is busy with work and hasn't asked too many questions since. But I know I'm running out of time. Eventually, he's going to want answers, and I have no idea how I'm going to explain all of this without completely wrecking his world. As for me, I'm running on fumes at this point. Between the custody battle, Peter's nonsense, and trying to be a good dad to Jack, I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Every day feels like a new nightmare I can't wake up from, and I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending like I'm okay. Update 4. After Peter's little stunt at Jack's school, I went into full protection mode. My lawyer filed an emergency motion to limit Peter's contact with Jack, and I started keeping a record of everything, every text, every missed call, every attempt Peter made to explain himself. It was exhausting, but I knew it had to be done. I wasn't going to let him play games with our son's life. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. I was nervous but ready. I had everything documented, and I felt like I had a strong case. Peter, on the other hand, seemed to be unraveling. His texts became more erratic, sometimes apologetic, other times threatening. He even sent me a long, rambling message saying he was moving on, and that he and Allison were going to start fresh. Yeah, you read that right. Peter and Allison were officially back together. I'm not going to lie, I felt a weird sense of closure when I heard that. It was like, finally, the mask had dropped. He had made his choice, and it wasn't me. But instead of feeling heartbroken, I felt free. Like, for the first time in months, I could breathe again. I wasn't stuck in this limbo, waiting for him to come to his senses. He had shown me exactly who he was, and I believed him. But that freedom didn't last long. The day before the custody hearing, I got a call from my lawyer. She sounded serious, more serious than usual. She told me that Peter had dropped his custody case. Completely. No joint custody, no visitation, nothing. Just like that, he had given up his rights to Jack. I was stunned. This was the same man who had been fighting tooth and nail just days ago, showing up at Jack's school, trying to force his way into our lives. And now, he was just not gone? I didn't know how to process it. On one hand, it felt like a victory. Jack would be safe. I wouldn't have to worry about Peter showing up unannounced or trying to pull more stunts. But on the other hand, I felt this deep sadness. Not for me, but for Jack. Because one day, he's going to ask why his dad walked away, and I'll have to find the words to explain it without breaking his heart. But the craziest part? It wasn't over. Later that night, I got a call from Allison. She was sobbing. I didn't even know she had my number, but there she was, crying hysterically and barely able to get the words out. She kept saying, I didn't know. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I figured she was drunk or having some kind of breakdown. I almost hung up, but then she dropped the bombshell. Peter had fled the country. Apparently, Peter had been hiding some pretty big secrets. Turns out, he had been in serious financial trouble for years. Something about gambling debts and shady business deals. And when everything started to unravel, he did what he always does, ran. Allison had found out that morning when Peter drained their joint bank account and left her a note saying he was starting over somewhere new. No goodbye, no explanations. Just poof. Gone. I sat there, stunned. This wasn't the man I had married. The Peter I knew wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a criminal. And now, I was left picking up the pieces of the life he had shattered, while he was off somewhere, living God knows what kind of life. I don't know if he'll ever come back. Part of me hopes he doesn't. Jack deserves better. Hell, I deserve better. But if he does come back, it won't matter. Legally, He's got no rights to Jack anymore, and I'm not about to let him waltz back into our lives like nothing happened. As for Allison, she's gone quiet again. I don't know where she is or what she's doing, and frankly, I don't care. I'm done with that chapter of my life. And now? Well, life has been surprisingly peaceful. Jack and I moved into a new place, a fresh start, just the two of us. He's been doing well, still oblivious to most of the chaos that's gone down. But I know the questions are coming. I've been working with a therapist on how to navigate those conversations when they inevitably happen. I want to make sure Jack knows he's loved, that none of this was his fault, and that no matter what, I'll always be there for him. Thomas, of course, has been a huge help through all of this. He even suggested we take Jack on a little vacation, just the three of us. A chance to get away from the drama and just focus on being happy. I think I'm going to take him up on that offer. God knows we could use a break.